Hello, and welcome into another episode of the Critical Fools podcast. We're on episode number 85, approaching 100 pretty soon. And this week we are reviewing New Jack City, which was a 1991 film directed by Mario Van Peebles, and starring, some big names in this: Wesley Snipes, Ice-T, and Chris Rock, among others. Chris, this is we've reviewed some kind of older gangster films, I believe, in the past. And this one is referred to as kind of a classic. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts, especially because you're up in NYC and probably have been through some of these neighborhoods. What was your thoughts on this film in this era?
There's two different questions. Thoughts on the film overall. I actually like this film, but I will say I don't want to jump into my critique so early, but at times I felt it was too cartoonish and too on the nose. You know me, I love maybe things are more obfuscated, maybe to the point where nobody understands the movie. But that's one. But I thought it was a pretty easy watch though. I never felt it's over already. I felt like, okay, it was over. I was like, okay, this was a nice, I didn't have to think about time, which is always good about a film, but I did feel like it was cartoonish. In terms of this era of New York, yeah, I mean, this is a movie that's responding to the great crack epidemic that happened in a lot of their urban centers in America in the 80s up to the probably mid 90s. It's sort of touched upon a little bit, in other films we've discussed around, the unsupervised youth, the flooding of drugs and alcohol in American cities. And yeah, this film touches upon a lot of those things, but I think on a more community level, I think there's an emphasis on the relationship between the police, the city, and the projects. And I think we see this through a lot of the main characters, especially Wesley Snipes' character, Nino Brown, I think he's probably the most important character to keep to discuss besides some of the other side characters like Ice-T's character. But I really do think Nino Brown, because he has some important monologues, and his and also how he changes from the beginning as an upstart, wants to just he becomes a victim of his own success in many ways. But regarding New York, yeah, I mean, what I will say is that the opening scene where they're throwing the guy off the bridge, I used to live in Queens, so very familiar with that bridge, very familiar with some of the projects action in that area of Queens, and yeah, I mean, in some ways things haven't really changed. I live now in Brooklyn, but I live in let's say a neighborhood that's a little more mixed. You'll see
it's up and coming.
I don't know if it'll ever truly be up and coming. It might take 10, 15 years at best. But for instance, this morning, I went out to do some exercise. And I did notice these guys. There was this guy that clearly was a yuppie walking in front of me. And he noticed that there was this project housing further down with all these, let's just say, young men just hanging out on the street corner. And he correctly walked across the street to make sure he wasn't on their side. And yeah, this happens a lot in my neighborhood where I think the new money, which is kind of I think what I would consider kind of that average, not average, but yeah, maybe that coffee shop manager, maybe that aspiring artist, they live in my neighborhood. Won't name it for my privacy protections. But at the same time, these were the neighborhoods that when my dad was living in New York, he told me that these were the areas that nobody of his he used to work in white collar Manhattan.
They would not go to these neighborhoods.
They wouldn't go to at all. It was a no-go zone. So that's kind of what's been shifting and changing. That areas that were no-go zones have slowly been redeveloped or slowly being shifted because of the cost. Because now, look, let's say you want to live in Manhattan. You want to live the Friends dream, right? Because every sitcom that's been popular in the last 40 years just takes place in Manhattan. You either got to do 4 roommates in a 2-bedroom, or you just got to be rich enough or have a job, or what's happening a lot now is have rich parents that help you cover some of that rent. Because now a decent one, even a studio in Manhattan with, let's just say, a nice doorman, a nice laundry room, good part of Manhattan, that's gonna come to $4,000 a month, and that's a studio, right? So in a 1-bedroom, imagine that's probably $5,000, So obviously people find deals for rent controlled and they find other opportunistic opportunities, but like there's always some kind of compromise. So yeah, I mean this film, what I liked about it is that it focused on not that world, but this other world where like these are people who are, you know, they're high risk of being victimized by their own
they're kind of
leaders.
forgotten by the city.
Yeah, forgotten by the CD. They're not really, because they're not really important to them, right? They're not high tax paying earners. They're probably not voters. And so like it's more of an optics battle, right? You see this through the interactions between like the police and the fictional politicians. But I thought one of the interesting things, and this is a theme often in these kind of movies, is, and probably one of my favorite themes, is like how the community resents Nino Brown, but at the same time has to like coexist with this world where like he's also maybe the few people that will do anything for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think this is really shown to us in the film with the scenes between the old man and Nino often,
Mm-hmm.
where he's, you know, the old man tries to go to the police, he's just ignored. He confronts Nino. That's one of the best speeches around that. Like Nino's trying to play Jesus and you know, Messiah, but he's not really.
So false prophet.
I went through a long monologue, but I guess like I guess what I'm hitting on is all the things that you probably liked about this film and like about this this era.
Yeah, I mean, I really like kind of like the darker tones of this movie because it's obviously not a positive. It's dealing with like the, you know, the drug underbelly of NYC in the late 80s. What I will say that cracked me up starting this film, even before the bridge scene, you kind of have like the shots of NYC from the aerial view. And it just goes to show how nothing really changes because at that point they're giving like a news report monologue about high inequality, like urban crime rising in the era of Reagan. I was like, dang, this is just things that we're talking about today that haven't changed really at all in many ways. So it always cracks me up when you start to see like certain things from different eras and you realize, you know, a lot of things are just still the same in that way. I really like kind of the setting of you know, just looking at NYC because I've been to visiting you several times to some of these parts. And what was kind of interesting, which I didn't realize until looking at the film after, but the main apartment complex that they end up taking over and making the central operations for the drug business in this movie, the Carter, we've actually been by that building when we went to go visit Little Senegal. And I remember seeing this like huge apartment complex and kind of like making note, but not really paying attention. I didn't realize that that was going to be such a key key monument really in this movie. Like that was just kind of like worlds colliding in a way. It's kind of like when you went to Atlanta and went to the main shopping area that was.
Oh yeah, that was wild.
It's kind of like whoa, like this surreal kind of moment in a way.
Yeah, I mean, look,
Atlantic Station. That was it.
Yeah, maybe we could talk about gentrification for a second, but what I've realized, because everybody likes to say like the impact, and I think like, and you know, and how it did affect communities, and like this is a huge topic. But what I've learned by like looking at, because I did an apartment hunt last year, is that gentrification, like it happens, but it's not as quick. It feels quick because when it's like before and after, it feels sudden. But now that I'm like kind of like in the middle of it myself, it's actually not as sudden. Like you were saying, like those parts of Brooklyn, like Little Haiti, Little Senegal, like there's some nice new buildings. But like I think I told you this when I was doing my apartment, like one nice building, and then you're like, well, this looks like it's from the 80s.
Yeah.
Now the examples they like to put out is like downtown Brooklyn and like Williamsburg, which was like usually in Greenpoint, which is like they used to look more like other like what Brooklyn used to look like in the 90s. But that was over the span of like 15, 20 years. And there was obviously a lot of investment. And their benefit also was that they have what was considered prime real estate, which is proximity to Manhattan, but also they are near the water. Like people, and this is like, you know, we're from the West Coast, so we know this from the beach angle, but people want to live near the water, right? It's whether that's soothing or it's a status thing. Like the more inland you go, like it's actually not that convenient to get to certain parts of Manhattan. And you know, unless you have like a nice park like Prospect Park, like it's actually not really that glamorous to live that deep into Brooklyn. And there's not like a lot of like tourist thing. Like it's just basically like suburb extended, with some high rises. So I actually think that the only way these areas will actually get truly gentrified is if New York keeps booming. So like what I can see happening is a shift, right? So basically, if Manhattan continues on this trajectory, I don't know how it will, but let's see it does. And like now you have to be basically making like $500,000 to live there. The people who are more upper middle class, you know who I'm talking about, like people who make like 100K household income, or even let's say combined household income,
less,
like,
dude. Yeah.
or like, yeah, they will end up taking over these places. And then I actually have no idea who the project people end up going, because like then they get pushed out all the way to Coney Island and stuff, and that's already not that great.
Nope.
So this is the battle the city's having right now, because there's been a mix of policies over the last like 100 years of like, rent stabilization and projects, because like it's not that easy just to demolish a project. There's protections around it. So there's a lot of intertwining, and I think it throws off a lot of people when like they're in a decent neighborhood, even in Manhattan, and they see a couple projects in there just around them. What's actually been proven, and they've done the studies, is that actually those projects end up having less crime because they're surrounded by way more wealthier people who aren't going to put up with it and are actually going to make sure the police are always around,
Really? They've actually looked at the data for that?
Yeah. So that's why like some progressive have advocated for, when you build a new building, you should mix it with people like who have like decent incomes, but also mix it with people who the state will subsidize, because it's proven that some families who have at least children and like, let's say there's no history of violence, they're going to end up in a safer environment because like their neighbors aren't dealing drugs and stuff,
Right.
Obviously the pushback, as you know, from other people is fairness, right? There's always a pushback of fairness of, I'm paying, market rate and these people are getting subsidized. That's one argument that always happens. I see in local city councils. And the other one is, which is a more undertone of classism and racism, is like, my neighbors aren't exactly who I thought they would be,
Right.
And it freaks people out a little bit. So that's why I think in the end, like it's been a very tough for the progressives to get their way, because that's kind of been the policy. Is like they've shifted over and over to like, and that's why you'll meet people who have like, they'll have a totally different experience about the city. Like they won't even like they won't even see a lot of the issues because they don't have to deal with them. But yeah, they did some studies. I was reading about this like years ago. They did some studies where like, and that's why progressives push for it, is because like it turns out that like, which actually makes sense. Like if you're in a neighborhood and all there is like your income level and side crime, you're likely to get seduced by it, or the police just are not around as much. They're only there for last minute prevention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'm gonna be honest. Like I like some of the nicer areas in New York, like yeah, they all freak out when something happens, but there's a reason why they're safer, and it's because not just the residents, but the police are usually like checking in, like just bypassing like more frequently. But I think it's really the residents, because the police can't be everywhere. But it's really the residents, like the residents. And that's what this film shows pretty well, is that the residents have more power than you think. They advocate for the community. They're the ones that can, kind of like try to gear people away from that life. And so like, obviously if you're living in like West Village and everybody's rich, like the people doing drugs are probably the people doing like Quaaludes and stuff, like not crack and like, heroin. So
Right.
It's a very interesting,
well, maybe a little bit of coke.
Yeah, but the legal one that you don't get as many years in jail. So
Yeah. Another Reagan era byproduct.
Yeah, Reagan era. Yeah. Almost over Reagan president.
With a little bit of Joe Biden cosign, but anyway, that's for another day.
But yeah, so I guess what I was gonna ask you was like, obviously we didn't grow up in this drug. I mean, we grew up in a city that was close to a city that had a lot of some of the overlapping archetypes. But
the original city of this team.
Yeah, basically. Oh man, I still remember being a kid going through Oakland. Like, I was like, "Whoa, this is Bay Area." I was like in shock, dude.
Dude, I mean, you could still. I was in Oakland, not that, and probably when I go back to California, probably going up to Oakland. There's a place you want to try, but certain parts are still really dicey up there.
Well, it's Oakland. It's always been dicey.
Yeah.
Which is why, okay, side tangent here. This is why, when like, yeah, because I know transplants from Jersey that have gone to live in the Bay, and they're like, oh, there's good deals in Oakland. And I'm like, there's a reason.
Where in Oakland?
There's a reason why there's good deals in Oakland, dude. They're like, oh, it's just right across the water. It doesn't look too far. I'm like, it feels like a miles away.
It's not the right. It's not that far.
Yeah.
But your environment's a little different.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, it's just I could say.
Yeah, they're trying to stay in West Oakland.
I think the areas that have been developing are probably right across like.
No, some of those are still pretty bad, like in West Oakland.
Well, I mean, I may be biased, but I just was like, there's a reason why it's that much cheaper. Look, even where I live.
But hold on, it's not that biased. Because if it's lower, it's usually lower for a reason.
Exactly. I was gonna make that comment like where I live. Yeah, I'm saving $800, but there's a reason I'm saving $100. You know,
I'm saving money, man.
Yes, but like there's a trade-off, right? Like, you know, you could live. There's always trade-offs for everything, right? But yeah, I just remember and I was just like, yeah, I don't think you're thinking it through. I was like, have you been to Oakland? They're like, nah. I'm like,
they can probably find good deals in the Tenderloin too. There's a reason, or Hunter's Point.
Yeah, wouldn't recommend those. Yeah, there's great deals in the Bronx. I've learned too. I'm good.
Woo! I remember taking that train up, and I was like, "Yo, there's some areas here, Chris, you don't want to."
I just love how they're really trying, though. I mean, somebody made a gamble, which I don't know if it's gonna work, but like they have all these nice buildings, and like we're talking like stuff that like exists in Manhattan, even. But you're still like basically a bike ride away from like that area where everybody gets shot every day.
The cut.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. Like, oh, I have this nice apartment, but are you gonna be afraid to even leave it, dude? And also, like, what I always worry about is like, okay, I'm in this nice apartment in the Bronx, dude. If I'm like a thug, I'm gonna just like see who leaves.
You're gonna trail.
Yeah, who leaves this and like study this for a couple months and be like, oh, I'm jacking this guy. One day he lets his guard down, dude.
Especially if you keep the same routine every day.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, most people are naturally yeah. Anyways, going back to the film. All right, so let's go back to the early scenes, which I thought were interesting. So we got our. It's funny. I don't even remember like the names of the characters, but I just go Chris Rock. So
that's we got Chris Rock's is Pookie, right?
Yeah. So we got the Pookie who was.
By the way, seeing him as a crackhead, I don't know why it was cracking me up when I was watching this.
It was kind of funny because like he was built for that role, dude. So yeah, this is a kid that's he's trying to be a street dealer.
Yeah.
He
trying to move up the ranks.
Yeah, he gets mixed up with the cops. He becomes a crack addict, which is very unfortunate. He recovers. Yeah, he recovers and then he works for the Popo.
But he only recovers because Ice-T saves him.
Yeah, exactly. And then he works with the Popo and then he relapses. And then he gets, let's just say he gets killed in a very
brutal way.
Brutal way.
What it was the issue is he's put in a position of power overseeing the drugs and then starts taking them and he gets high and they realize he's high. And that's when they realize he's wearing a wire.
Yeah. And he's got cooked. What I will say as a plot hole, I just feel like no real police force is even though they're corrupt, they're not that dumb to like, oh, this guy just recovered. We'll let him be. We'll get him by being in charge of the drugs. Yeah. Like you got to pull him out. Dude. Are you kidding me? It's like telling like an alcoholic, you know what? We need you to do this inside job.
Of course, that'll jump. Look, I mean, this is not the most overly well thought out in every point kind of movie. This is very much. This movie feels like it's from like the late '80s, early '90s. Like it's a la Die Hard. Like some of the scene, like even the shootout scenes are so unrealistic. It was cracking me up. Like I couldn't help but laugh because I haven't seen an '80s kind of shootout movie in a while. But when they're unloading like 200 rounds of, of bullets and nothing, no one's getting hit. I'm like, all right.
Not only that, but they're not even reloading. I'm like, okay, guys, you gotta like empty the clip at some point. They're like, I'm like, okay, guys, I didn't know that infinite guns existed. We would have won every war in the 21st century if that was the case, dude. It's like a video game. It's like
Vietnam wouldn't have stood a chance.
Yeah, exactly. The guy's like, I'm like thinking like, dude, usually there's like 12 to 15 because I've been to the range. I'm like, okay, there's 12 to 15. And actually what you learn in the range is that if you're like just pointing and clicking too much, the clip goes out and like that, like you're empty. These guys just going Rambo, like, let's go. And then I'm like, okay, so basically the plot hole is infinite guns here, dude. Like, that's good.
But I mean, that was just a product of the 80s, because I mean, you just talked about it. Rambo, Die Hard, Terminate, all those had that plot hole built into their movies.
Yeah, this one seemed excessive that I picked up on it though.
I know, I was dying of laughter.
I was like, this guy's never reloading. Okay, that's cool.
Oh god.
I guess we should. I guess we could get into like. I mean, his character arc was interesting.
Pookie. I mean, yeah, he was a crack addict that relapsed, and he relapsed as an informant and died. I mean, that wasn't that bad. By the way, I just love some of the like jokes that are clearly like the 90s that you can't really make in a character today, and especially in this community of of like drug dealers, calling the stutterer "da-da-da man." I don't know why that cracked me up.
That was that would be impolite in today's world. Before we get into like maybe the main two drug guys, what did you think of the buddy cop? Really, because this was trying to also. It's funny how this movie was trying to be multiple archetypes. Talk about drug game and the community, New York, and then also be a buddy cop movie, and then a drug lord movie, but let's focus on the buddy cop thing. Like, so we got Ice-T and his. I mean, obviously,
partner. Like I don't know why. Like I don't really find Ice-T's acting very good.
It was terrible, dude.
Yeah,
it was straight up terrible, dude. I was like, dude, I don't even know who your character is. I just know who you are, dude. You're Ice-T. Basically, Ice-T as a cop.
Have you seen him in like the Law and Order movies?
It's the same crap.
Yeah. He plays the same role, like sucker, like just getting like It's just like it doesn't feel authentic when he's like acting. I don't know what it is, but that's just me.
He's trying to play like the whole like I'm a cop with street cred. I'm like,
yeah, I'm a street cop. It's like all right, and it just comes off like a bit too much.
And then you got the Nick Peretti, who was like, I was Pookie once. I was like, bro, I can't deal with that.
Yeah, I know.
This is why this movie is like has the rating it does sometimes. I was looking at some of the reviews. I was like, yeah, I see some high points, but I see some real low points. Like, I was. What do you mean, man? What do you mean? Like,
it had really strong elements, and then some were just parts were absolute trash.
It was so
I don't know if you agree with that.
I do agree with that because that's what my vibe. I was like, oh, this good movie's got me, and then it's like Peretti's going like, I was Pookie once. I was addicted, and I'm like, and Ice-T's like, what do you mean? And then he's like, yeah, I had to get rehab. I was like, I'm done, dude. He's like, death has no race. I was like, I'm sorry, dude. Guys. Can I go back to watching Boys in the Hood, dude? This is too much. Dude.
I will say I love the Wesley Snipes character a lot.
That was the strong point in the film, right? He played that
Wesley along with his the interaction with G Money.
Yeah, G-Money. That's the next two I wanted to bring up. Yeah. But like that was like the strong parts of the film because it was basically a story of guys that wanted to rise up. They were tired of taking like the scraps. They wanted to be the kingpins, but in becoming so, they became the very monsters that I don't think they envisioned them becoming, right? I don't think G-Money envisioned himself becoming like a crack addict. And then
or a snitch.
And then and Brown became basically a guy. I knew that the guy, they want to have like no aspect of redemption once he used the little girl as a body. Even I was like, F the law, dude. Like somebody just when the Ice-T had the gun, I was like, why are you even like just shoot him? just shoot him,
who?
Like Nino when he was in the beat him up in the trash. After he did the girl, the body, I was like, this guy needs to die, dude. Even I Yeah, I would have said this. I would have respected the movie more even if he did get off, because I would have been like, okay, you know what? They really played up like everybody wants Nino to die. Because at that point, how do you even root for the guy? You have to be like evil, like.
Well, yeah, I think that was the point, though.
But imagine that like they didn't kill him. I think that could have been like.
Also,
oh.
I hated how he was like, how he took G Money's girl, and then he's like, "What?" He's like, "It's just." He's like, "Just suck it up." Basically, I was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
you."
pretty much.
I was like, "Wow, you preach loyalty, and then you won't have any towards your brother, literal brother's girl."
But I think that was. I think they really, like, again, this movie wasn't on the nose. I think they really did all that stuff to show you that Nino Brown was just he was basically the very like thing that he claims to be against, right? Like he's self-serving. He doesn't really believe in loyalty. He wants loyalty to him,
even though he kept saying, "What was it? I am my brother's keeper."
Yeah, he wants loyalty to him, but not to. He wants it one way straight on everything, right? Even his first girl, he threw her to the wayside, right? So he abandons everybody that's not useful to him. He just wants to keep rising. And then when he knew the walls were closing in, he made sure that he was closing loose ends, and he was trying to save his butt. Like that was it. Like he became basically rat poison, you know?
Right.
And like I said, like, and even in the courtroom, right, he played it really well. Like, oh, I'm not really the leader, right? And then like, oh, we don't grow the drugs in New York. Like they come from somewhere. They have to, we're just a cog in the machine. I can give up my suppliers and stuff, right? He was doing whatever he could, right? And then he saw himself as a savior, which is why I like the old man scene when he's doing the donations to the church, because this happened often in obviously today and also in that era. And the old man calls him out and is also the one that takes justice through his own hands, because Nino his character has always been this way in the whole movie, right? Like slick, thinks he can get away with everything, and at one point he doesn't, and probably to his shocking surprise. And the lawyers in this film were garbage too. Like,
oh yeah,
like they clearly know he's the kingpin. Like, unless he's gonna give up the kingpin in South America, like, really, you're gonna cut a deal? I was also like, guys, this doesn't seem that. Like, politicians love their figurehead case, dude. Like, I was like, man, this movie's the last stretch. I was like, this movie's really unwinding on me, dude. Like, what's going on here, dude?
It was obviously an anti-drug movie that just went a bit too far.
It became very preachy, and I was like,
yeah.
Okay,
especially with the thing at the end where it's like, all right, you want to summarize as just Nino Brown's like that's the stop. That's where it's like all the badness is just with Nino. It's like, well, there's a whole system. Like they just oversimplified a lot in this movie too.
And they left that little blurb at the end about.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, I was like, this is such a politically motivated.
Yeah, I was like, what was this? Was this executive produced by Nancy Reagan? What is going on here?
Maybe it was. Anyways, what did you like the most about the film, then? Was it the Nino Brown character?
Probably Nino Brown. Some of his monologues. I will say the monologue he had with G Money at the end when he's like, "You struck a side deal." I give credit to actors because I don't know how they just pull it off, and that's just part of the talent. But being able to like cry on the spot like that, it was just, it's always been impressive. So like that kind of emotional confrontation between the two, I really liked. I liked his character overall. Like, I got to be honest, I'm like a sucker for Wesley Snipes because I love like Blade and some of the other movies he's been in when I watched as a kid. So he does have like a bit of a soft spot as an actor for me. Ice-T is trash to me. Like, there's no way around it. I really liked Chris Rock. I think he's always been funny and kind of kills his role as a Kraken in this movie. But yeah, I was pretty mixed on this film overall. I know it was a classic, and we've like watched NWA and some others. So it's just interesting seeing a film exploring kind of like drug culture during New York in this time.
Yeah. Also, I also forgot to bring up the
Italians is the other
the racist joke. Yeah, I was gonna say it relates to the Italians. Like when they send them the figurine with
that was crazy.
and then they cut the Italian guy's hair, and like the racial tensions within the New York City dynamic was interesting. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say though. Like, this is the second film we've reviewed of this era that's looked at that. The first was Do the Right Thing.
Yeah.
Looked at a lot of racial tensions between those two groups as well.
Yeah, but that was about the police and the community.
Which one?
Do the Right Thing. This was about
Do the Right Thing. Also had the Italians, because he.
Yeah, but I meant like more of
that,
the central, let's say, conflict was the community versus the system.
Right. But you also had the racist Italian brother that worked. Yeah, remember?
Yeah, I do remember. No, I mean, like in that regard, there's a lot of overlap. I meant more like I don't live that far from that neighborhood, so that's great.
Yeah, Bed-Stuy.
Yeah, dude. I love watching. Going past the Do the Right Thing mural and the Spike Lee murals. They're the best, dude.
I also saw Spike Lee at that Arsenal bar.
I did. Spike Lee's I haven't gone a lot because the season's been kind of crap, but he's a fan, so he goes to that one. I prefer the Manhattan one though, but he goes to that one. But yeah, he's it's always. But the problem now is that now that everyone knows that he goes, I've noticed that like we get a different type of clientele now. Like they're not real hardcore fans. They're just trying to see Spike. It's like, come on, guys, have a life outside your celebrity crush. Even though he's a legend, but come on.
That is what it is.
But
I don't know what more we want to, or if we want to get into anything else. This is a pretty straightforward film. It's just interesting looking at it from like 30 something years later, kind of looking back at this era of filmmaking, really, and of this era of New York City.
Yeah, I would say I have one thing before we get into ratings
we
can discuss, and it's ties to the film but not directly. I guess, like, what are your thoughts? Because this movie kind of made me think about how the conversation around drugs has sort of changed, but not changed. So what I mean by that is, like, okay, you had cinema like this film, and there's other films in the 80s and 90s we can pull like whatever, politicians speaking, like you said, Reagan and Nancy Reagan, don't do drugs campaign.
Just say no.
Yeah, just say no.
That's what this reminded me of, was like a big just say no movie.
And so this and what I mean is that there's been this new conversation part of it because of, I think now, for better or worse, Americans rely on media to teach them everything. Mm-hmm. And now I'm just curious your thoughts on like how this conversation is in some ways not shifted, but shifted, especially with like really popular shows like Narcos. And now people have a more of a superficial understanding about like how it kind of works, even from like Latin America all the way up. And like, if you're actually really interested in this, other than reading books, you can watch all this media and see how like how it all kind of connects in the end. And yeah, I just find it fascinating because I feel like now people are as fascinated still with the cartel drug game in a different way now. Because I think, I'm gonna be honest with you, I think there's some let's just say what's the word, like not that they look up to them, but like
there is a glorification, just like there was.
That's the word, yeah. Glorification of like these drug kingpins now, especially these Latin American ones, dude. Like,
but I mean, it was the same thing. It's I mean, Tim Dillon went on a huge rant about that, of people glorifying mafia members. Yeah, they've been doing that for forever as well. It's kind of just different gangsters that people, and I don't know what it is within the human psyche and trying to want to look up and glorifying figures of pillars or kings of crime. Really, there is something about it, and I just don't know, because there was an obsession with Narcos and people watching and kind of looking up to Pablo Escobar, and people even I remember watching a podcast with a bunch of Colombian girls who were abroad, which we've talked about before, and I've sent you one of their clips. They're like, oh, all these girls when they go abroad, they're like, oh my gosh, Pablo, he's so good. Like and they're like, dude, he was very traumatic for our community. Most Colombians didn't really like Pablo because there was a lot of, uneasiness, obviously, during that time. But yeah, I guess to your point, some things have changed in a way that shifted. But I mean, before that, people were just looking up to like The Godfather and other mafia members before.
That's a great film too. But by the way, the way The Godfather is mafia propaganda, I was reading a long time ago that Hollywood was very worried because the mafia still had a lot of power back then.
Mhm.
The Hollywood was worried that let's say a cartoonish or bad depiction would actually lead to blowback that they didn't want. They don't want to get into fist
Yeah,
fights or
potentially
bloody.
hits or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and because people forgot.
Especially because there was an LA crime family that was pretty powerful at that time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the mafia is still around, but I think their power is diminished with the rise of the super cartels, and as well
Well,
as
also the FBI crackdowns with RICO cases.
yeah. I think like the last real king boss that people knew of, like mainstream, like it was Gotti. This is why he's so famous. When you read about him, he actually is not that impressive, but he's just like the last real crime boss. That's what he like. Well, he's dead now, but that's what he got to live off his like legacy on. It's like, wait a second, there's been like way more impressive crime bosses, but we make movies about this guy because he was the last one. Like, because now there is no unifier for the mafia bosses in New York anymore. So the Godfather, one of my favorite films too. Like I mean, I watched that as a kid a lot. Like I was like, mob bosses were the best. Dude.
See?
they had honor back then, dude. Not like these cartels, dude. But it was, and also it's based off a book that I didn't realize that like I was really popular during that era too.
Yeah.
They say that the book is actually like,
but
better.
Oh, sorry, I'll let you finish.
That's pretty much it. Go ahead.
No, my whole point was what are you asking, or what was your question with that?
Oh, my question was like, what do you think about like how the conversation around drugs has changed? Because I think in some ways it has changed since that period.
In what way?
Do you think it's been...
What I will say is, well, that's a policy shift. Yeah. So during that era, are you talking about how like it was very strict, hardline stance against drugs?
I guess what I'm referring to specifically is like how we went from a society that, like you said, just say no, and Nino Browns are the bad guy.
So now drugs have kind of been legalized a bit.
To now drugs have been legalized, certain drugs, as well as a better superficial understanding that drugs, the end game isn't the Nino Browns, but it's this bigger system, and there's more awareness around.
Are you talking about where the production comes from?
Production, how it moves to the border, and how the border is the issue. I'm just kidding. I don't want to trigger you.
It's a bit. I mean, for some drugs, you're not wrong. Like that is, but for like what we're talking about, like, okay, yeah, you switch from crack cocaine becoming the biggest problem to now it's fentanyl, and what. Some people like to think that fentanyl only comes from across each border. And really the precursors for these drugs come from China because that's the cheapest production. But I hate to break it to you, there's a pretty easy to produce chemically, and a lot of people are producing it here in the States.
Hey,
dude, and I think that's
not what the politicians say.
Look, you crack it down here, people are just going to start producing more. I mean, they've been making meth here in the States for the better part of like 3 decades.
I know. I saw Breaking Bad. Yeah.
Chemically, these are not terribly hard drugs to make, and I think that's the issue. Whereas, like with cocaine, it's a harder drug to synthesize, and it's easier to just extract in the refined product from the actual coca leaf itself than to make it synthetically. So that's why you go through that whole route, the supply route, all the way from Colombia and Peru up. But with some of these more powerful, easier to make drugs synthetically, you're not going to necessarily need for it to be made south of the border and then come up. It can just be made here. And I think that's the issue. This is going to be a harder fight to combat. No. And just thinking you can shut down the border and you're going to solve this issue.
Hey, that's
I hate to break it to you. It's not as easy. Oh, come on. You're not. Look, I get you're trying to play devil's advocate, but I think you admit that a big issue here is trying to deal with this demand side that no one wants to talk about or deal with.
People love their drugs. Time to legalize it all. Let's go.
I don't really want to end up like Amsterdam either. No one wants to have an honest no one wants to have an honest conversation about it, though.
Of course not, dude.
I mean, if you want me to be honest, I'm not totally mad at Bunny Colvin's Amsterdam.
I actually don't know that.
Huh? Yes, you do. Amsterdam from The Wire. Remember legalized drug zones?
Yes. Okay. So I didn't know you were gonna do a Wire reference. I was like, what is this? Is this a news thing I missed? I was like, oh yeah, buddy.
We're talking about drugs, and then and you're shot to make a Wire reference.
Yeah, it's true. I should not be. The Wire.
Yeah. I mean, if you want me to be honest, like to try to combat people's superficial understanding, I tell them just to watch The Wire.
Yeah, that's already too much work for most people, though.
I've converted a couple people, and they're like, "Man, what an amazing show!" I was like, "I know, it is."
Damn,
tremendous
nice,
show.
dude. I just hope to watch Sicario.
Okay.
Because I'm an agent of chaos, dude.
What I will say, I have my issues with Sicario. Fire soundtrack though.
It actually is a good movie, but it's not the thing you should.
It's not realistic. It's not realistic.
I know it's not realistic, but it's what I need to feed the people. Anyways,
I will say, but like some of the music they have from that film, absolute fire. I've heard it like used in some reels. I'm like, damn, it really sets the tone.
Yeah, it was a good soundtrack, dude, and great director too. But yeah, The Wire's great. Yeah, I mean, The Wire's one of the greatest shows ever. So I actually like it more than The Sopranos. Like, I've still got to finish The Sopranos.
It's not The Sopranos is. I could. It's all context, right? I could see why The Sopranos was so impactful, given the time and how it paved the way for other great shows in terms of what it kind of opened up for budget and what you could do creatively. That being said, there's a lot of issues with the show itself.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. That, but I do love aspects of that show a lot.
No, I like the show. I don't know why I can never finish it. There's got to be a reason.
It gets slow in certain parts and kind of redundant and very violent. Like at some point there's minimal growth, but like the first season, like Tony's issue with the mom just killed me.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. All right, I guess we could jump into ratings now.
All right. Yeah, I'll let you go first since I picked this.
All right, yeah. I thought this film was great in some ways, really bad in others. I think this film is actually one that people could still watch and get actually a lot of value, especially those who are not as in tune with like what happened in America in the 80s and 90s. It does feel a little bit on the nose too much. We've discussed the plot holes. And yeah, it's funny. Like, I don't often like to agree with IMDb, but I'm in the same ballpark. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I could see why it was rated this way. Like, it's not a bad film, but it's like, it's missing like that extra, those maybe attention to detail, maybe a little more subtle on the thematically, maybe some casting errors that could have made it like even like closer to what I would have give like, you know, a Boys in the Hood type of film or something like that. And I think
NWA, one of those.
Exactly. And I think that holds it back enough where I'm like, Snipes is great, but he's not great enough to punch up 2 extra points for a film. So 6 out of 10 is where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Snipes' character was great as Nino Brown. He had some great he really had some great monologues, especially when he was defending himself in the court. Some of his interactions with G Money I really liked. I thought Chris Rock was great in his role. Like you said, he was meant for to be a crackhead. Was so funny, or like play that role. Like he did that very well. Ice-T, just I don't know what it is, man. I just can never get into his acting and in his character. I never really like. I don't know. He just kind of annoys me, and I don't know what it is about him. But well, it was interesting with. Just seeing New York in this angle. I mean, I do have a soft spot since I've been to some of these, so it's cool seeing some of the areas that they actually showcase in the film. Being like, hey, I've been there. Like, wow, things have definitely changed in some ways and are still kind of the same in others. But overall, yeah, there are a lot of plot holes in this movie. Some of the acting is not always the best for some characters, and some of the action scenes are just totally unrealistic. So I have to give this film a 6.5.
Man, close again. I thought you were gonna pull it up to 8. I thought it was a hidden.
It's not worthy of 8.
Dude, Ice-T, as bad as he was, I know who he is. I remember him. But the cop, his partner, I'm like, who are you, dude? Like, You could have just been written out of this movie. I wouldn't have noticed, dude.
Nick Peretti, Judd Nelson.
Yeah, you could have just written out of this movie. I wouldn't have noticed. No offense to the actor. Maybe he's a good guy, but I was just like, why are you in this movie? To have that line that I was Pookie once, I'm like dead, dude. That killed me. I was laughing so hard. I was like, they really put this character so you can have that moment, dude. Like, are you kidding me? This is so bad the writing, dude.
I was Pookie.
I'm like, bro, like we need to change the script, dude.
They needed some more edits.
Yeah. All right. I'll let you kill it, and then I'll.
Yeah, so if you enjoyed our commentary on this, please like and subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for our next episode.